it's time for the Lightemup Lounge. Welcome to you all here via Zoom with us at the Lightemup Lounge, and welcome to everybody joining us over on Facebook for our live stream. It is a pleasure and honor to welcome Glen Case, the man behind Kristoff Cigars, with us today. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat box. Use the raise your hand function or make yourselves heard here via Zoom. And to everybody watching us over on Facebook, please make sure to post your questions underneath the live stream into the comments, and I'll happily bring them forward and share them with Glen here during our session. So without further ado, it is a pleasure. Glen Case, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time and being here with us today.
Reinhard, thank you for having me. This is an honor and a privilege for me, to have me on the show. So it's an honor. Thank you.
Now, we're going to talk about the history of the brand, your journey with cigars, but for a company and the cigar brand that is named after one of your sons, is the family component, the family element and the community and the camaraderie of the cigar world what ultimately brought you into it, switching over from a career in finance and then finding your home, your passion, your belonging, and your vocation in this so family driven industry?
It is. I mean, so when I decided to depart the corporate world, the finance industry, as you had mentioned, I spent 19 years in corporate finance. Was an executive for the last 9 years at one of the top 3 banks in the US, and just got tired of the politics, the bureaucracy. And at the time, my wife was an independent broker selling for other manufacturers, right? So when you start a new company, you start hiring independent brokers. There's no fixed expenses. It's just 100% commission. And she had done that for years. So we decided to partner up and broker cigars together. And 6 months into it, at the time, we got a call from our largest manufacturer we were brokering for. And they said, you guys have done a great job. You got a product everywhere and you're fired. So I looked at my wife like, we just had record numbers. How is this possible? So in the industry, what happens is, again, new manufacturers, as they're starting off, they want to limit their fixed expenses, so they hire brokers. And once they elevate the market in terms of sales to a point where they can afford to go in-house, they let their brokers go and then they hire in-house sales. So I told my wife, I'm like, I can't function this way, right? I want to kind of manage my own destiny. So I'm going to start making my own cigars. And she said, what do you know about making cigars? I'm like, I don't know, but I'm going to find out real quick. So I hooked up with a gentleman in the Dominican who's been in the industry now for almost 49 years, and took a tour of his factory. And he said, come on down. And he goes, if you like what you see, blend your cigars, design your packaging, and we'll do the production. So I did that. And that was back in 2004. And the original company name wasn't called Kristoff Cigars. So when I started, it was called Exclusive Cigars. And in the beginning, blending is an art. It's not a science. So as I was learning to blend and get educated on tobaccos and where tobaccos come from and what complements each other in terms of the different tobaccos and, again, the countries they come from, when I came out with the first Kristoff cigar, that's the one that kind of put us on the map, if you will. And so that's about a year after I started the company under Exclusive Cigars. We rebranded the company as Kristoff Cigars, which is named after our son, Christopher. Now, unfortunately, he has no desire to be in the cigar business, but he's a great tester. He's got a great palate. So when I'm blending something new, I always give him samples of it and say, all right, tell me what you think. So that's a little brief background on the history of Kristoff Cigars and how it started, and then what I really started under, which is Exclusive.
Now, I want to dive a little deeper into quite a few of these large pillars that you mentioned and these roads some road stamps or these important steps along the way. But when we go back all the way to your original career in finance, what were some of the key learnings and the components that you took with you that sort of inspired you and probably also gave you a bit of a different, I wouldn't dare say understanding of the cigar industry, but at least a different approach in how you wanted to operate, run your business, and those sort of things?
Sure, no, I appreciate the question. So one of the things that first come to mind is obviously understanding managing a company, managing the income statement, the balance sheet, understanding the finances behind it, cash flow, the return, and managing the revenue and the expenses for the company. So that was obviously natural for me, which is obviously really important regardless of the industry, right? You have to understand how to effectively manage the finances and the economics of whatever business that you're in. In addition to that, I also spent the last 9 years of my career in business development, product development, and marketing, promoting financial services. Those principles, those skill sets are the same. So whether you're, promoting a financial product or promoting a cigar, those disciplines and how you do that and how you leverage it are the same. It's just a different product. So again, just to recap, understanding the finances of managing a company, and then secondly, understanding the dynamics of launching a new product, marketing it, advertising it, etc.
So let me maybe sort of phrase the question differently or look at it from a different angle. Do you think that no matter which industry you're in, it's always the same qualities and attributes that will set you up for success on the long run?
Yeah, besides the things I mentioned now, of course, with a consumable good like a premium handmade cigar, the other sort of things that I brought to this is sort of our business mantra, which is quality, consistency, and availability. In other words, so the very first cigar I came out with, which was our original Criollo, coming up on almost 17 years ago, that cigar has to be the same as it is now as it was then. So we have to make sure that we're managing the consistency of the product. In addition, we have to manage the quality of the product, which basically is, we draw test every single cigar. Our methods of processing double and triple fermenting tobacco has to be the same year over year. We have to buy from the same growers, the same processors, the same field, and lots within that field to ensure the consistency of that cigar and that blend. So that's a really important sort of shift from non-consumable goods to consumable goods. And I think we've been pretty successful at that. And again, in terms of the quality, consistency, and availability, which, if you're back ordered on a product for a short period of time, maybe a week or 2 weeks, it's okay. But if you're back ordered on a size or a blend altogether for more than that, the retailers aren't going to let that shelf space stay empty. And they're going to put something else in there because that real estate is very expensive. So we want to ensure that we're also providing availability to our customers throughout the US and throughout the world, frankly.
Which probably is all the more challenging in the current times we're living in, and with everything that's happening in the cigar industry, in the cigar world. Thankfully, we're in a very good position where the demand is rising. We see new smokers coming into the industry, a generation that is now becoming interested in smoking handmade premium cigars, and people focusing on quality much rather than quantity. But for manufacturers and brand owners, it also puts a lot of pressure on all your operations. And especially we spoke with Jose Blanco and many other manufacturers about this. The shortages of tobacco, they're real right now.
100%. It's a real issue. So the supply chain, from everything from raw materials, so the tobacco that you just referenced, it's in short supply. During COVID, most countries in Central America were shut down. Factories were shut down for 4 months, like ours was. So as a result, not only is it hard to get raw materials, it's also hard to get labor. So the people that sort of were out of work for a long period of time ended up finding other careers, other jobs. And so now there's even a shortage of labor and qualified labor. So now myself and other manufacturers are going through the process of having to hire, train, and get them up to speed to sort of fill that pipeline, right? There's a shortage of. So it's affected the industry in a lot of different ways, and it's been a challenge, but we've done a pretty good job. We're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's fortunately it's not a train coming at us, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely, and I'm very glad that you brought up the human component and the human factor in all this, because this I also realized is something that you in particular and Kristoff as a brand and a company has been very focused on and always put a lot of emphasis on, and that is the team effort, bringing everybody together to work and head towards the same direction. And that's not self-explanatory in today's world anymore. I mean, my background is in hospitality and wines and spirits, and this industry is severely challenged by the lack of talent and people who are willing to give it their all. And when I was in Las Vegas for PCA, where we met, everybody was complaining that it's so hard to find good people. How do you think about that, and how do you go about that as a company?
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. It's a challenge for any company. One of the things I realized a long time ago when I was even in corporate world is if you think you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I've been fortunate enough to surround myself with people that are smarter than me. And at Kristoff, we consider ourselves a family. And so I'm really blessed to have an amazing, talented team in our corporate office and even the sales reps throughout the country, who I look to them for ideas and direction, get their opinion. And so it's really important to find those highly skilled people that you can sort of lean on and come together as a group. And I always say, no one works for me. I'm just blessed to be able to work with some really smart people. So it's a challenge, but then it's just about holding on to those talents and those good people. And we've been successful in that as well, thank God.
When you started in the cigar world, together with your wife, and you briefly mentioned it, you broke it for some very well-known brands, and then you recalled the story of one of the large manufacturers terminating the cooperation because they started their own in-house sales operation. Is that something that you see happening over and over again in the industry, and probably something the industry should handle differently, or do we need a different mindset or thinking in that? Because it doesn't really sound like a very sustainable approach that way, or at least not treasuring those relationships that you have built for a long time.
Right. It really becomes back to managing the economics of the business, right? In addition to that, it's a focus of sales. So when you're working with a broker, that might be representing 5, 6, 7, 8 different manufacturers. And so when they visit a retail shop, they're pushing all of those brands. And there's only so much bandwidth for the retailer to buy into all those different brands. And so once you've built up the market to a point where you can afford to go in-house, now you've got one person that's focused only on your product. And so that's sort of where that paradigm shift comes in, and that sort of shifting to a more focused effort, pushing, in our case, obviously Kristoff, versus pushing multiple lines. And the payoff is there. Obviously, when you've got one person selling only your product, the success rate is much higher, but it's getting to that point, which is the challenging part, to the point where you can afford to get somebody in-house and have them focusing only on your product. For us, we offer a lot of benefits. We've got salary, commission, bonuses, car allowance, phone allowance, health insurance, profit sharing, retirement plans. So we try to keep a very aggressive and attractive package for all of our employees, which at the end helps with retention.
What working as a broker, though, definitely helped you with is shape your vision further, educate your palate, and learn the ins and outs of the industry. What was the feeling like, though, to suddenly evolve into that role of a brand owner and manufacturer? And quite often, I'm curious with people who approach a factory or who start with the idea of creating their own brand, but then making that a reality is such a huge leap, right? And I can imagine it takes a lot of trustworthiness and a very solid relationship with those manufacturers to convince them that you're for real. And it's a huge step, isn't it? And
it is a huge step, and I can't tell you the number of times I've walked into a beautiful cigar lounge and approached the owner, and they look up at me and they say, "Great, another gringo making cigars for a living in Chicago, no less, right? Chicago, Illinois." So it was a challenge, right? And so as the brand started building, it lended some credence to the brand. And all of a sudden they start getting requests for it, but it was a long, lengthy process. And, I call it shaking hands and kissing babies, going into a lot of cigar shops throughout the country, just by myself, trying to get this started until it got some brand recognition, some awareness in the industry. But it's a very challenging and long process. So a lot of times people think, oh, I'm going to launch my own cigar brand and I'll be making millions of dollars overnight. It doesn't work that way. It's a long, arduous process, a lot of time, a lot of effort. So it's a challenge, and it's not easy.
And obviously, working with or being approached by Rolando Villamil and working with Charles Fairman in the DR, then sort of helped you kickstart the journey and bring that vision to life. What was it like to work with the factory, and how long did it take you to have their trust and support, so they truly open up their vault and give you access to the best raw material, and also probably give you the freedom and flexibility to have things done a certain way that you envision and that you want to associate your brand with?
Right. So Rolando, like I said, has been in the industry almost 49 years. He's worked with some of the biggest players in the industry and brings a wealth of knowledge to me. So he is my mentor without a doubt in terms of learning about tobacco and different types of tobacco and hybrids and his blending experience. And, we collaborate on different blends. So, for the first couple of years, the factory was kind of like, who's this guy Glenn? Is he for real, and how serious is he? And fortunately, through a lot of time and effort and working with a great team that I've got, we built that credibility. And knock on wood, we're at where we're at because of all the efforts of Rolando and, again, the team and Rolando mentoring me during this entire process. And I'm still learning. Tobacco is again an art. There's not much science behind it besides the growing and that sort of thing. But it's been an honor to work with him and see the Kristoff brand grow.
A bit earlier, you said quality, consistency, and availability.
Yes.
As the core pillars of everything that you do. I guess most people would say quality has to be the core foundation of everything that you do. We briefly spoke about availability, but then consistency is also like one of these three core pillars and very hard to achieve. Um, when you think about Kristoff on the long-term perspective and building a legacy brand, where do you see that yourself heading towards? Where do you see the evolution of the brand? How do you continuously build on that foundation with these values that you pictured? And what would you like to create for the future with the company?
Right. So again, the mantra of quality, consistency, and availability, I think, is paramount to any business, and certainly in this industry it applies. Um, so we're going to continue to focus on that. It's in terms of growth, it's continue to partner with distributors throughout the world. We're still in the growth mode. We're seeing incredible growth this year, even last year during COVID. It's been great. It's been a blessing. So we're going to continue to focus on, again, the quality, consistency, availability, and partnering with the right people. We're in every state in the continental U.S. We're in 40 plus other countries outside the U.S. And we're continuing to see that grow, which is great. But I think it gets back to who you're working with, the integrity of the people that you're working with, and again, focusing on those pillars of quality, consistency, and availability. If you smoke a Kristoff cigar today, it should be the same cigar that you had smoked, 15, 16, 17 years ago.
Mm. In your most recent cover story with the Cigar Journal, you mentioned it also before. Fabulous feature, by the way. You said that politics and bureaucracy and some of the nonsense in the finance industry ultimately tired you and made you look for that change. Well, at least the politics and the bureaucracy are probably just as present in the cigar industry today as in other industries. How's it different though, when you see it from this angle and through the other lens of the cigar industry?
Right. So I think the politics and the bureaucracy is not as prevalent, if you will, in the cigar industry. However, one thing I did notice when I transitioned from corporate and finance to the cigar industry is a how can I put it, a lack of sense of urgency. So everything is mañana, tranquilo, take it easy, relax, it's fine. So nothing happens really fast. So that was the hardest thing for me to get used to in the transition. In corporate, again, I was an executive, so I can make a phone call and I'd have people in my office within hours to address an issue. Here, you got to be a little more patient, right? Nothing really happens that quick, which is fine. That kind of slower pace is great, but you also at the same time want to get results and address whatever issue that you're dealing with in a timely fashion. But that was probably the hardest challenge, but I don't feel as much of the same level of the politics and the bureaucracy. The cigar industry is one big happy family. We kind of, all of us know each other. We're either friends or acquaintances. So we get together at PCA or TAA or in Dortmund. It's a pleasure, right, to see our friends and family in the industry.
Most certainly, and it's more the outside pressure that is stressful for the industry and the people therein, with everything that's happening in terms of regulation and tobacco being treated in a very unpleasant way all around the world. But then again, as you said, the industry itself is truly where we need to focus on unity and bringing everybody together and speaking with one voice.
Very true. Very true.
Also, in this wonderful article of yours in this Cigar Journal, obviously all your brands and your various cigar lines are depicted. What's interesting, it's mentioned there that all your cigars are rolled end to end. Is it something that you specifically requested when you started working on the Kristoff idea, and something that you defined as a Kristoff standard, or was it already a standard operating procedure with Charles Fairmont?
So Entubar, the technique, which is a bunching technique, is a very traditional Cuban method where the filler is individually tubed or scrolled, which to me is a right way to make a cigar. The challenge with that is it also takes a higher skilled buncher to do it, and it's far more time consuming. But I always like to, I'm kind of, how can I put it, anal at doing things the right way, the traditional way. And so I was insistent that we use Entubar bunching versus a booking or accordion technique where the tobacco is folded over on itself. So the benefits of Entubar is a more consistent draw, a better draw each time. And it's, to me, it's just the right way to do it, right? So for me in the very beginning, that was critical that the factory pursued that technique in terms of our bunching process. And again, I think it's paid off. There's more efficient ways to do it, but to me, it's not the best way to do it.
And in general, I believe the cigar industry is full of things and habits and traditions and craftsmanship that is probably not the most efficient, but the right way to do things, which is part of the beauty of it all. We have a question from Cy Sweeney here, or maybe a few more questions. So Cy, why don't you speak up and share your question with us? Welcome, brother. It's great to have you.
You too, Reinhard. Great to see you all again. Just remember what the questions were.
I'm sure
the first
you
question
come
was,
up with many more.
yeah. The first question was, would he compromise on quality to keep the retailers' shelves stocked, especially with some doubts in the future with the supply of tobacco and that, or would you always just make sure the quality and is good, is exceptional?
Cy, first of all, it's nice meeting you.
You too.
I really appreciate the question. And the short answer is we are not going to sacrifice quality for availability. The one thing that'll kill a brand, right, besides kind of the things we've talked about, is pushing product out before it's ready to be pushed out. So, as I had mentioned, most of the manufacturers, if not all, are having the same supply channel issues and etc. But I'd rather hold off on getting something out that isn't ready than pushing it out and all of a sudden we've got quality issues, we've got consistency issues. That will kill a brand as fast, if not faster, than the lack of availability.
Yeah, because I enjoy Kristoff cigars as well, so it's good, A 7x70 there, I'm going to smoke at the weekend and see if I get lockjaw.
Wow, 7x70. I'll be honest, that's the size that I don't smoke.
Yeah, I don't either, but now and then I give myself a challenge.
Yeah, no, I love the challenge. It's always good.
Yeah.
But I'm more of a Lancero guy, a Robusto Toro guy.
Yeah, Robusto's good. Yeah. And the second question is, you were just talking about unity, and there's a lot of talk lately about, I believe that unity is very important in the cigar industry with the regulations and different things. And I'm the ambassador for Ireland. So I do send a lot of emails into our government, our TDs and stuff about the difference between tobacco, cigarettes, vape, etc., and that we're more of a natural product and, and all that. And I know it's only a small country, but I think if everybody unites, it's important. But the one thing with unity, and everybody's talking about, now you hear sometimes big people in the game going, oh, unity is this and unity is that. But I did notice this year's PCA that some of the big players didn't turn up. And I just thought that kind of put a bit of unity out the window. What is your opinion on that? Them not turning up?
Yeah, I'm going to be very careful how I answer that question, Sai, but it's a great
Yeah.
question. So unity is important, right? So the
Mm.
industry, certainly within the States, there's been a small, let's call it a smaller group of manufacturers that have really stepped up to the plate and donated their time, their money, and efforts to fighting regulation, right? And the sad part is, and I don't know if it's complacency on other manufacturers that haven't stepped up, either again with time or finances to help fight legislative and legal efforts. But it boggles my mind why they're not doing it, because this is the future of their business and the future of our industry if we're not coming together in unity to fight for the industry, right? So, I mean, I've gone to DC a number of times to meet with members of the House and Senate, and to your point, explain why a premium handmade cigar is different than a cigarette, right? It's all natural, it's non-addictive, it's a celebratory product. But there's a number of manufacturers who haven't done that. And without naming names, there's probably some manufacturers that want regulation to go through to squeeze out and get rid of the competition, which is a whole nother topic,
Do you think?
And
Yeah, it is, and it's just interesting because I think it lets the side down a small bit when they're asking the consumer as well to get involved with petitions and different things. It lets the side down when some of the manufacturers that we all know are, come off the top of our heads when we think of, cigar manufacturers aren't turning up. And I think it lets just not just themselves down, but or the industry or the CRA or the PCA, whatever. But I think it actually lets the consumer down as well, these people not turning up.
that's absolutely true. And you raise another point. I mean, there's sort of that third leg of the stool, which is the end consumer. And those that understand and follow the regulation and the threat of the regulation, they're stepping up, financially and doing what they can to support and write letters to their congressman or their senator, which is great. But again, I think it's a sense of either complacency, like, oh, it'll never happen, or just a lack of awareness and education, right? I think a lot of people just don't understand it at the consumer level, but it's critical that everyone's kind of stepping up to the plate and doing what they can to fight for what we love and enjoy, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. There's my couple of questions, and thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Si. I appreciate it.
No problem.
And
Back to Reinhard.
We had a follow-up question from our dear friend Ian.
Ben, hi. Thank you. Very much enjoying this. And I was interested in your comments about Entubado and the Concertina, because I was just going through some old cigar videos and I found one of Claudio Scroi at Monbacho showing how they use what he calls base, which seems to be a combination of they fold the leaf over and then they do the Entubado. Are you familiar with that? And have you tried that?
Yeah, Ian, thank you. It's nice meeting you. So again, I go back to tradition. Entubar bunching is the traditional way, and in my opinion, the right way. And so Entubar translated essentially means tubing. So all that filler in the cigar, you've got eccentric tubes going through it, which enhances that draw, enhances an even burn, helps ensure an even burn. That combined with draw testing every single cigar, which a lot of manufacturers do not do, to be honest with you. They might, so after they've bunched a cigar and rolled it, they're putting wheels of 50, and then some manufacturers will, as quality control, they'll pull out one or two out of that wheel, cut off the cap, draw test it, and if it passes, they assume every single cigar in that wheel is good. And that's not necessarily true. So I'm sort of sticking with our knitting, sticking with tradition on Entubar, and we're going to continue to do that.
Okay, I'm not in a position to tell you otherwise. It just, I had heard that with Concertina, you've got more holes to get through. So if Entubado is not done right, it gets constricted and then you don't get a draw at all because there's one hole in the middle And if that gets obstructed, I mean, I found with some Cubans, they get plugged. There's a bit of leaf that's the wrong way, and then there's a problem. And also on the question of draw testing, I went to the Padron factory, and they say they don't use draw masters at all. And I've not had problems drawing Padrons. Their quality control seems to be really good. So, I'm sure there are different ways of doing it. I'm not saying yours is better or worse than anybody else's. It's just the way you do it. And if it works for you, then great.
Right. And, that's what we've kind of followed. And we didn't do that from the beginning, by the way. The first year I started off, we weren't draw testing every single cigar. And so early on, we're talking 16 years ago, we had a bit of a challenge where, I'm smoking the cigars going, wait a second, this is a little tough draw, or it's too loose of a draw. So we immediately implemented the draw test method to check every single cigar, again, getting back to quality. And, I'd love to be George Padron and his family, because they've done an amazing job. They sell to, they want to sell to, when they want to sell to, and any retailer is happy to receive whatever they get, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not a Padron yet, so
No.
yeah.
No, well, thank you. That's interesting. I mean, I've only ever had Cubans that have been plugged or really tough draws. Nicaraguans, which are one of my favorites, always smoke well, and the Dominican. I haven't had yours, but I've had Fuente and I've had La Aurora, and really love them. So I must try them the next time I can. Do you sell in the UK?
I've got to double check. I don't handle international sales. That's somebody else. So
I can help you out. We have Gareth Williams watching over on Facebook, who is importer and distributor in England.
Okay.
So regards and also very best wishes and spirits and blessings from Martina Kleinlagel. She was also watching our Facebook live stream, and so Martina, all the very best to you, and her regards to you as well, Glenn.
Indeed. Hello.
Yeah, plenty of wonderful people joining us for our sessions, be it here at the lounge or over on Facebook. It's always greatly appreciated. And just because the name Claudio and Mombacho fell a little earlier, I had a very interesting question from Chris, who sent us his question regarding the consistency component. And he was curious as to why that very same flavor profile and the consistency of a cigar always has to be the ultimate end goal, and whether or not vintage cigars with changing characteristics as per the growing season or that particular vintage crop of the tobaccos could be interesting. And I know that Claudio did something similar with the cosecha idea where he presented vintages, but is that also something that you could envision or you find interesting?
Yeah, so one of the things I heard you say, Reinhard, is that depending on the crop that year, it could be weather conditions, a very dry season, a very wet season, and ultimately what that affects is the yield that you're going to get from that particular plant. And that yield drives up or drives down price. So if it was too dry or too wet, the yield you're going to get from that tobacco is reduced. And so, you could attempt to use tobacco that's probably substandard. But again, if it gets you want to get back to consistency and quality, you've got to basically take the cut. If it's a low yield, our price goes up, but we're going to use the best tobacco we can possibly use. So I think it's critical, at least for us, that we follow that philosophy. In addition, I'll go back to the point that we're buying from the same growers, the same processors every year, the same fields and the same lots within the field to ensure that consistency. If you start switching up regions within a country or even lots within a country, I mean, there are microclimates within fields which break down to lots. And if you're not going back to that same lot, that same field, it's going to taste different because of those microclimates. So again, we take a lot of time and effort to ensure that we're getting the best tobacco and using the best tobacco we can, even if it's at a higher price.
No, absolutely. I think it's also probably a matter of tradition and the way it is learned by the people in the industry and the consumer. Where in the wine world, for example, you would accept certain changes from one vintage to the other simply because that's the common operating model for most of the manufacturers. Whereas in other categories like cognac, for example, certain Scotch whiskey or cigars, obviously it's all about that consistency. And I guess the answer is probably that your bread and butter will always be a lineup of your core brands and your core cigar lines that will be consistent throughout. And then you could possibly sprinkle a few either limited editions or vintage runs on top of that, where you present a specific crop of a specific year and always have those differences, which can be just as interesting, I guess.
Oh, 100%. I mean, so to that point, we belong to an association called Tobacco Association of America, which we have our convention once a year, and it's happening the end of October. And depending on, to your point, if we have limited tobacco or very special tobacco, we'll do a short run of something, and it's only available to those retailers that are part of the organization. And then we'll push that through, and once it's done, it's done. But for the core line, it's got to be the same. I don't want someone saying, "Hey, Glenn, I used to love your, what I'm smoking the Corolla Matata right now. I used to love that cigar, and it's totally different now." I don't want to hear that. So again, getting back to consistency and the things we talked about in terms of growers and processors, it's got to be the same each and every time.
Speaking of limiteds and core lines, there seems to be different approaches in the industry where some people just have a massive portfolio because every other year, half year, they're adding something new. And we all know the most common question in the cigar industry when somebody walks into a shop is, what's new?
What's
right?
new? Yeah.
So there's a certain sort of pressure on the manufacturers to bring new smokes to the market on a continuously basis. But I believe having a clear and concise portfolio is such an important component of the overall experience as well, where you do not get lost in a website with 200 different SKUs, or in a shop where and ultimately you don't know which cigar you'd like to go for. Is that also something that you like to follow, or you try to achieve with Kristoff, to have a clear range of, like, this is our core brands and what we stand for, this is our signature?
Right. And this is a really good question. It's a double-edged sword. So you're right. Consumers are always like, "Hey, what's new? What's new in Kristoff? What's new in Kristoff?" And half the time, the retailer is saying the same thing, "What's new?" And the other half of the retailers are saying, "Please don't launch anything new. We've only got limited space, and everyone's coming out with something new, and we can't carry everything." So we try to balance that and toe that fine line where we're not coming out with something new all the time, but when we do, we want to make sure it's special and it's right. So we try to balance that a bit. And I was going to launch something new this past year, but because of COVID, the tobacco wasn't right. We backed off on it. We started doing some pre-release PR on it, and ended up backing out of it because it just wasn't right. It wasn't ready. And so we'll do it when the timing is right. And we're not going to launch something new just because it's new.
Very good point. Brian Julian is here with us, as always, brother, all the way from Los Angeles. Good to see you.
Hello, good. Thanks. Good morning. Good evening. Ian's turning on the lights. It's getting dark. I'm just starting my day. This is a great chat. I'm really enjoying this. I had a couple of different questions. One is, I don't know anything about the world of finance. It sounds terrifying. How realistic was the film Trading Places in terms of the stock floor? The next question is about the name. I think instantly my first thing that came to my mind was Christofferson. Are you a fan? I'm listening to it right now just because of the name. And then the next question, I like the conversation, and it comes up a lot here in terms of, you guys are chatting about doing things the right way, which I think can be a little bit, it's a matter of opinion sometimes in terms of morality. Some people have different ideas about what is right, but you're doing what is right to you, which I think is fascinating. I don't know anything about the rolling method you guys were talking about, but I do understand like ideas of things. And for me, it's the word integrity, which I think of as not doing something good. You could rob a bank, well, you could do it right, but it wouldn't be the right thing to do. So I'm curious when it comes to doing things the way that you feel are right to do. And you were talking about how it takes longer, this process, and maybe there's a bit of a trade-off. And you were mentioning earlier about you would never sacrifice quality to get the product out there. And I always think of how does it feel to sort of make that right decision? And do you feel sort of that it's a bit of a sacrifice? Like, nobody wants to be the McDonald's of cigars, but in terms of growth, do you feel proud and satisfied to say, I'm not going to take this next leap of growth because I'm doing it the right way?
Right. So Brian, nice meeting you, my friend. And I love California and LA. So the first question was, coming to America, is that kind of a true representation of
trading places?
Or is trading places? I'm sorry. Yeah. I'll be honest, I was never on the trading floor. That wasn't my area of expertise, so I could not tell you. Your comment about Chris Christofferson, honestly, I can't tell you how many times I've been asked that if it was named after him. It has nothing to do with him. So I had to chuckle when you asked that question. In terms of, and you might have to rephrase the question, or clarify, but I'm a traditionalist, right? So being a gringo, living in Chicago, doing this for a living, I don't have this long lineage of, generations of growing tobacco and making cigars. So all I have to go on is kind of what's been traditional in the past. What is, I don't want to say the right way to do it, but the traditional way to do it. So it gets into nth bar bunching again. It gets into our double and triple fermenting of our tobacco, and just making sure we're doing it, in my view, the right way, the traditional way. Again, I'll go back to the kind of the three pillars: quality, consistency, and then availability, which we're not going to push, which I had mentioned. We're not just going to push something out there to fill the shelves if it's not ready, if it's not right. So, and it's served us well. I mean, following the quality and consistency model has been beneficial to us. I'm not sure if that answers your question or questions, but
yeah, it was kind of a vague question. I don't know. My questions tend to trail off at the end and confuse the guests mostly.
I'm easily confused, so bear with me. As a marble.
Well, I just wonder, because for me, at a certain point, I said, I'm not going to bring on more people. I don't trust them to be able to do it as well as I can. So that means now I reach a plateau in terms of growth, but I feel satisfied, sort of knowing my niche. I guess you decide that you know your market, and you don't need to expand at the cost of quality or doing things the right way. So in a way, it's settling. And it's disappointing, but at the same time, you feel really good about it because you're doing it the right way and you found your place. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. There, again, the goal is to continue to grow the company, right? Where growth is paramount. It's also doing it the right way, which is paramount. And I think it gets back to your other point, that you touched on, which is working with the right people, right? Whether it's in our employees in our corporate office, or hiring the right sales executives that are knocking on the doors. It's surrounding yourself with people that are better and smarter than you are, than I am. So again, it's formulating the best team you possibly can, and focusing on the mantra that we focused on.
Cool. Thanks for the chance. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Mm-hmm. Cheers.
Ryan, we love your sometimes confused questions, so keep them coming. Always enlightening. We also have a question from Dara Weston.
Hey guys. So I just wanted to ask Brian, it's nice to see another finance guy involved in cigars. I work in finance, and I initially started smoking Upman cigars because of the story of Herman Upman, and he was a banker and he started producing his own cigars. I've tried some of your cigars and they're really good. I've gone away from Cuban cigars recently and I've gone to more New World cigars. What do you think, Brian, of the stretching of the word boutique cigars? I mean, I saw somebody recently who produces, I think they said 60 million sticks a year, and they called themselves a boutique producer. Like, where do you think the kind of number range sits? Because to me, boutique is kind of like you say, you stick to the knitting, you have a couple of good core lines, you keep making them really well, and then you introduce some new blends, limitadas or new additions to the range, to keep offering kind of new things and growing the business slightly.
Yeah, Dara, thank you for their question. I appreciate that. So there's a couple of things here, and I've been asked this a lot of times. What's the definition of boutique? I don't know that there's a hard number in terms of number of cigars produced a year that defines boutique versus non-boutique. And in the Cigar Journal article, we're kind of in this weird space, right? We're not boutique anymore, but we're also not one of the big guys. So we're in this sort of transition space, if that makes any sense. But we've got 19 core premium blends that we make, and we'll again launch something new when the timing is right, and the blend's right, the cigar's right, the product's right. But it gets back to a balance, and if somebody's making 60 million cigars a year, they're not boutique, or 25 million cigars, I don't think is boutique. And we're not quite at that level, so we're in that dead zone. And there's a lot of people in that lower boutique category that might only be producing a few 100,000 cigars a year, or 1 million cigars a year, whatever. But it's just managing growth healthy, managing the economics of it healthy, and managing quality in a smart, diligent way.
Great stuff. Thanks for that, Brian.
Dara, many thanks for the insightful questions. Much appreciated. Glenn, I wanted to briefly come back to the media theme, and because we spoke about your cover feature with Cigars Journal, I'm very curious as to, do you immediately feel an impact of such a story, and is that something that you can right away see in the way business flows and people talking about the brand, or just the recognition of the company through such an article and such a feature? And probably the long question, or the real part of the question, is sort of what's the impact of the cigar media in that very delicate ecosystem?
Right. Reinhard, that's another good question. The challenge with any print media, whether it's advertising or feature articles, it's very hard to quantify what that does to the bottom line. There's no direct response mechanism. In other words, there's no way to tie back a purchase of a Kristoff cigar to a particular article or a particular ad. So it's a very hard question to answer, and it's even harder to quantify. I would say, when we're talking about media challenges or media channels, excuse me, social media has become huge, right? So intuitively, I'm seeing a lot of value in that. But when you've got a magazine as well, like Cigar Journal, well respected throughout the world, there's an absolute benefit to it. But quantifying that benefit is very difficult to answer. It's really hard. And we're seeing, again, tremendous growth this year. Is part of that from Cigar Journal? Yeah, probably. I just can't tell you how much.
Fair point. And yes, new media and social media has dramatically disrupted not just the cigar industry, but pretty much any industry there is, and all our personal lives as well as our professional lives. Do you also see that as a double-edged sword? I guess we sort of all do with when we feel a bit of pressure or the tension that being online at any given moment of our time, it affects us in a certain way. How do you go about that yourself? And obviously your move from the finance world to the cigar world, you mentioned it's a slower pace. It's probably a more comfortable or leisure approach to life in general. Do you feel similar when it comes to social media?
Social media is very important, as I mentioned, and we have somebody that actually handles that for us at sort of the corporate Kristoff Cigar level. All of our sales reps are tasked to posting relevant, and I repeat that, social media content, not something that's so obscure, someone that has no interest in, right? So we try to make sure that it's timely and relevant. And I'm on social media every day, and I probably personally should be more active in Facebook and Instagram, etc. But it's almost a mandate, as I mentioned, that the reps do something relevant each day, and of course the person that manages our social media does it each day and make sure it's relevant.
So I had a very good follow-up question in regards to the sales component. I believe with the quote from Mr. Trudeau and Kristoff, right, Sai?
Jared Trudeau, yeah.
Yeah, I had he had what was the quote? You can teach cigars, you can teach sales, you can teach cigars, but you can't teach giving a crap. Put it nicely,
I was going to say it for you, but that's Jared's classic line, and it's so true. And yeah, I mean, so part of the point he's making here is, everyone looks at the cigar industry as this fun social business, right? And so if they think they want to go out and sell cigars, whether it's for Kristoff or someone else, they think, you just go out there and you hang in a cigar shop for 2-3 hours at a time and smoke cigars and talk to people. It's not that, it's an investment in time. It's a lot of windshield time. It's, you might be in a cigar shop for 30-45 minutes and it's on to the next. And you really have to care about the brand. You have to care about the job you're doing. It gets down to numbers. You got to be productive, right? So back to Jared's point, you have to give a crap. He doesn't say that, but I know exactly what you're saying. It makes me laugh every time I hear Jared say it or someone else say it.
I was saying it politely.
Yeah. He also says it's the easiest job not to do, right? In terms of sales in this industry, you've got to be self-motivated. You have to get up every morning, have your days scheduled, your week scheduled, your month scheduled, and it should be 2 to 3 months out, who you're going to see, where you're doing events. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but if you do it right, it can be very lucrative as well.
Glenn, you also made being on the road a lot one of the the key components of the beginnings of Kristoff, the growth of Kristoff, and you continue to do so. People treat that differently, I believe. Just recently, the Cigar Authority podcast was talking about some of the new people in the younger generation, and how they work in the industry, and that probably some of them aren't as visible or tangible because they're not on the road as much, like Rocky Patel way back in the days, or like yourself. Do you think you have to build a business that way? Or if I phrase it differently, if you were to start all over again with a new cigar brand, would you do things differently with the current world that we now live in, the new media and everything that we've experienced recently, also through COVID?
Yeah, I don't think I would do it differently. This is a very incestuous industry, and people like to see the brand owner. And so when I started the company, again, going on 17 years ago, it was being on the road a lot. It was 220 plus days a year. And you have to get your face out there. You're not only branding a product, right? You're branding yourself. So, you know, I think in the growing stages of a company, as you're building it, it's incredibly important that you're out there doing that on a regular basis. And I'll say shaking hands and kissing babies. You have to do it. Now, fast forward, you know, Jared has been brought up. He's our executive vice president. You know, he's picked up a lot of the travel, and you know, he's got for himself and personally has a lot of brand recognition. We have a cigar named after him, the GT Signature Series. So again, I think it's kind of a careful, calculated plan. It doesn't mean my travel stops. I've just sort of backed off, and especially with COVID, things are a lot different after COVID and as we continue to work through COVID. So, but short answer is, yeah, in the beginning, you've got to do it. As the company sort of matures and the brand awareness is there, there's opportunities to back off a bit.
Do you still see a slight chance that somebody from the family, some of your kids, might step up and take over some of the business?
Unfortunately, probably not. So I'm stuck doing this forever.
So when we already look ahead into the future, on a more holistic level, what's your opinion? You briefly mentioned it, on the current stage of the industry, and much rather, where do you see the industry headed for the next couple of years? Yes, we're living through boom days. Some people already see warning signs on the horizon, and the past hunting us with everything that we've experienced in the 90s boom. What's your take on that?
Yeah, you know, the unfortunate part is we're on the radar in terms of regulation. And I don't care what country we're in or you're in, we're on the radar. And so I think that's going to be our biggest challenge, the anti-smoking. I'll be careful what I say politically, but you know, we have to keep up a good fight. And that, again, if that means our time, our treasures, or talent, manufacturers have to step up and continue to fight for this, because regulation is not going away. It's just how far can we keep pushing it off until we get to the ultimate desire, which is excluding premium handmade cigars from regulation altogether. But even if we get that, it's still going to come up at some point down the road. So I think that's the key, and that's the one thing that keeps me up at night is fighting the regulation within, again, the U.S. and outside.
Apart from the regulatory aspect, what other major challenges or issues do you see in the cigar industry? And related to that, what could we all do, either as cigar lovers and consumers, manufacturers, brand owners, or all the people in between, the retailers and the distributors? What could we all do in order to make the industry a better place?
Yeah, so to answer your second question first, I think it's get involved. Again, whether you're a consumer, a manufacturer, processor, get involved. Again, time, treasures, and talents, fighting for the industry, educating the right people on why this is different than a cigarette or vape or whatever else, chew. And then getting back to your first question, I think it's something we talked about, and it's more of a short-term issue, I'm hoping, which is, again, raw material. And hiring and finding talent to work in this industry on the manufacturing side primarily. Again, COVID is it's been crazy, but with COVID, we also have people that have more downtime, that might be working from home more and have more time to smoke a good cigar. So I think that's driving up demand, but you know, we need to get the supply chain issue resolved, and we need to get people supporting and fighting against regulation to get rid of regulation.
Do you primarily see the old guns smoking more cigars now because they have more time and because they're probably in home office? Or do you also see a lot of a younger generation, not young people per se, but a younger generation in their early 30s maybe, who are more and more interested into premium cigars?
100%. Yeah, the demographics are changing. I mean, the older generation that smoke cigars are still smoking cigars. But Reinhard, to your point, the younger generation is also getting into it, and they're in their late 20s, early 30s. And, you know, it's a celebratory product. It's a relaxing activity. It's a conversation maker, right? With people you know or don't know. I call it the equalizer. I don't care what you do for a living, how much you make. This brings people together, and you could be having the worst day of your life or the week or the month, whatever that is. But after about 45 minutes of having a good cigar and relaxing and having some good conversation, things are better again, right? So I'm optimistic about the future for the industry, but also cautious at the same time.
I couldn't think of a better way to end our wonderful conversation, Glenn, and for a better round up of everything that you shared with us today. Inspiring, insightful, as always. I would like to personally thank you for taking the time and joining us here at the Lightemup Lounge, together with all our dear friends and family around the world. As always, we have people logging on from all over the place. Brian is just finishing breakfast, whilst some of us are already headed towards bed. So it's been a real pleasure, as always. Many thanks for your time, and Glenn, we wish you nothing but the very best for a great future ahead with Kristoff Cigars, and I'm very much looking forward to smoking one of your cigars with you super soon. So many thanks.
Reinhard, thank you. It's an honor and a privilege, and it was great talking with your fans and some of the Kristoff fans out there and meeting new ones. So thank you again. It's truly an honor and a privilege, and I appreciate everything that you do and love your show, my friend.
Thank you so much. It means a lot. Many thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot, Glenn.
Take care, guys.